He wasn't elected, he wasn't crowned, but for one brief moment, J.P. Morgan ruled America, not by title, not by law, but by the weight of trust. And in a world built on credit, trust was everything. At the turn of the 20th century, the United States was young, ambitious, and reckless. Railroads stretched across the continent like veins of steel. Oil barons and steel kings were forging empires. Money flowed faster than ever before, but the system was fragile, built on confidence, not certainty. And when confidence breaks, everything else follows. In that world stood one man, John Pierpont Morgan. Born in 1837 to a world of candles and carriages, Morgan was not an inventor or an industrialist. He was something stranger. He didn't build the world, he financed it. Where others saw opportunity, he saw structure. He didn't gamble, he controlled. He believed the world needed order, and he was willing to impose it. As a young banker, Morgan learned early that power came not from what you owned, but from what you could guarantee. His father taught him the language of trust, the subtle art of reputation, connection, and intimidation. Morgan's stare alone could silence a man. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. By the 1890s, his name was a currency in itself. He built his empire from mahogany desks and telephone wires. He financed railroads, reorganized steel, and quietly dictated the flow of American industry. When the U.S. government ran short of gold in 1895, it was Morgan, not Congress, who saved the nation's reserves. He lent the Treasury millions of dollars of his own gold in exchange for influence. The people never voted for him, but his decisions reached every corner of their lives. By 1907, Morgan was in his 70s, older, heavier, his face carved with the permanence of power. He spent his mornings aboard his yacht, the Corsair, reading cables from London. He was no longer just a banker. He was the system itself. But beneath the marble calm of his world, something dangerous was stirring. The stock market was feverish. Speculators borrowed money to chase impossible profits. Trust companies, unregulated banks, multiplied overnight, promising easy returns. It was an illusion of wealth, and everyone wanted in. Then, one October morning, the illusion cracked. A copper magnate tried to corner the market, using borrowed money to manipulate prices. When his scheme collapsed, panic spread like fire. Investors fled. Banks began to call in loans. People lined the streets outside trust companies, demanding their deposits. It was the beginning of a run, and once a run starts, it feeds on itself. The Knickerbocker Trust, one of New York's largest, failed within days. Fear swept through the city. Shops closed. Factories paused. Ordinary men stood in silence watching the numbers vanish from the boards. The government had no central bank, no safety net, no plan. The president was powerless. Wall Street looked to one man, the only man with enough credibility to stop the collapse, J.P. Morgan. On October 22, 1907, Morgan summoned the nation's most powerful bankers to his private library on Madison Avenue. The room smelled of leather, smoke, and dread. Tall windows were sealed shut, doors locked. One by one, men entered, titans of finance, now stripped of arrogance. They took seats around Morgan's table, their faces lit by the glow of gas lamps. Morgan sat at the head, silent, listening. For hours, he let them argue, plead, confess. When he finally spoke, it was with the certainty of a judge. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is no longer about profit. This is about survival." He divided the banks into groups, assigning them to rescue failing institutions. He inspected balance sheets himself, glasses perched low on his nose, red pencil scratching across ledgers. When one bank hesitated to contribute funds, Morgan locked the doors and told them they were not leaving until they agreed. Outside, crowds gathered in the cold, staring up at the dark windows where their fate was being decided. As the night wore on, messengers ran in and out with telegrams from every corner of the country. Morgan's clerks carried trays of sandwiches and coffee. The air grew thick with exhaustion and fear. Finally, near dawn, Morgan emerged. The deal was done. The banks had agreed to pool their money, stabilizing the system. The panic began to subside. The city exhaled. He had done it, saved the American economy. Newspapers hailed him as a hero, the man who stopped the collapse. But even as praise poured in, others began to ask a darker question. How could one man hold such power? In the aftermath, Congress launched inquiries. Senators demanded to know how private financiers could control public destiny. Morgan sat before them, calm and unmoved. "The first thing," he said, "is character. Before money or property or anything else to him, money was just a reflection of trust, and trust was his alone to command. But power has a way of drawing enemies. The press painted him as a king, the monarch of money. Caricatures showed him with a crown and a scepter ruling over Congress. Behind closed doors, politicians whispered about a new idea, a national reserve, a system that would prevent another panic, a system that would make sure no man could ever again decide the fate of a nation by himself. They called it the Federal Reserve. It was built in the image of Morgan's method: collective stability, centralized power, controlled liquidity. The irony was exquisite. In stopping the panic, he had proven the need to replace himself. His personal empire became the blueprint for institutional control. In his final years, Morgan retreated to his estates, surrounded by art, books, and silence. He collected Rembrandts, Michelangelos, and ancient manuscripts, a private museum for a man who had seen the cost of chaos. His health failed, but his legend grew. In portraits, he looked immovable, like a statue carved from the very idea of authority. He died in 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve was born. The era of personal banking power was over. The era of systems had begun. But the question remained: was he a savior or a tyrant? He believed he brought order to disorder. Others believed he replaced freedom with control. Maybe both were true. Maybe every empire of stability is built on quiet domination. Years later, during another crisis, a historian wrote, "Morgan didn't stop the panic. He delayed it, long enough for us to build a bigger one." The truth of J.P. Morgan lies somewhere between the vault and the mirror. He was a man who believed in control above all, in balance sheets that never lied, in systems that could outlive their makers. But the system he saved became the one that enslaved us all. He saved the world from collapse. And in doing so, he built a machine that would never stop running, no matter the cost. Because J.P. Morgan didn't just save capitalism, he defined it. And in the end, he saved the system by proving it could never save itself.